But first, when is this Labor government going to grow up and get on with facing up to the big issues and stop slagging off the previous government? I know bad habits, they're hard to kick, but they're not in opposition anymore. Their job is no longer to blame the other mob day in, day out. It's about saving this country from cost of living hardship, high inflation, high energy prices, workplace vacancies, and our weaknesses in defence capability. Now, they've clearly given up on cost of living, high inflation and rising energy prices because it seems to be completely beyond them. They've got nothing lined up to solve those real-life dramas that everyone seems to be suffering from at the moment. And today, the Defence Minister Richard Marles released a new budget analysis on defence spending. Great, I thought. Here's what's moving forward and here's what we'll do about it. But no, it could have been a campaign press conference. Marles decided it was an opportunity to blame the other mob again. And that's exactly what he did. You see, he identified 18 major procurements worth nearly $70 billion that suffered cost blowouts. Oh, horror. What a surprise. Government projects go over budget? What a shock that is. I cannot remember the last time a government project of any sort in any jurisdiction came in at or under budget. It's as rare as the dodo bird. But out came the baseball bat.
We have inherited a defence procurement mess, a complete mess. What we had with the former government was a government that was totally focused on press releases and announcements, on hoopla and vaudeville, but when it came to the active management of defence procurement, they were one of the worst governments in our nation's history.
And surprise, surprise, he went on to tell us that 28 of these projects were running years behind schedule. The truth is, this is the culture inside the department, inside the ADF. It is chaotic, it is full of massive red tape, and it is dysfunctional. All governments have experienced that in the last 30, 40 years. And also on the issue of blame, Marles was so selective in what he had to say today. Listen to his lecture on spending.
The budget needs to be managed in an excellent way where we focus on the quality of defence spending so that we achieve the highest capability as soon as possible. And the Albanese Labor government is committed to doing exactly that.
OK, lecture over. Let's lecture Richard Marles for a second. What he didn't tell you is that the Morrison government's last budget allocated over 2% of GDP for defence, almost $50 billion. It was a record. And what did Labor do under Defence Minister, now Defence Review Panel member Stephen Smith, in the 2012-13 budget, which wasn't that far ago? He slashed the defence budget to 1.56% of GDP. They turned their backs on defence 10 years ago, and that was the lowest level as a number on GDP since 1938. And this was Peter Dutton today.
What he's saying is that when he was in government, when Labor was last in government, the spending was at the lowest level since 1938, and somehow the problems of Labor not ordering frigates or corvettes or fighter jets or submarines during their whole time in government, that somehow that was the fault of the coalition government when we were in power.
Worse since 1938, and he had the temerity today to get stuck into the Morrison government. And fancy putting Stephen Smith on that review panel, seriously. The Defence Association regard him as one of our worst defence ministers.
He has an appalling record as Defence Minister, not just in terms of administration, but in the fact that he didn't really make too many decisions. And one of the reasons we've got a 10-year hiatus in the shipbuilding program, he was a big contributor to that.
Now, if Richard Marles is the saviour of poor work in defence and is fair dinkum about major procurement, which we're waiting for, where was he last week when the defence industry gathered for the Land Force's International Defence Exposition in Brisbane? He didn't even turn up. They sent Assistant Defence Minister Matt Thistlethwaite to the expo, who, I'm told today, from people who were there, lasted one lousy hour. How many new howitzers, Bushmasters and Hawkeyes can you see and get briefed on in one lousy hour. Not many. That's not fair dinkum. That's just plain pathetic. It is not in Labor's DNA to be serious about defence and the reality of war. We know that. So how about they stop their politicking, start accepting they're in government, not opposition, and do something significant to solve the problems, OK, they've inherited. Because they won't magically disappear, these problems. Get on with it.